Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. When you're not on the ballot, sometimes an election season can get a little lonely. But Senator Maggie Hassan will be back in the arena in a big way come January as the Senate becomes a legislative crucible for the agenda of the second Trump administration. Senator Hassan is our guest this morning for an extended interview on Close Up. Senator, thanks for being here.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the Trump cabinet nominations. Obviously, Matt Gaetz has withdrawn, but several others remain, including your former fellow Democrats, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. What are some of your reservations with these picks?
Well, let's just take a step back first. The Constitution says that the president can appoint his cabinet, but needs to do it with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. That's an obligation I take really, really seriously. And I know my colleagues on both sides of the aisle do too. So my job is to study a nominee's record, study their hearing testimony. In some cases, I'll be at the hearings, depending on which nominee it is. But some of these nominees on their very face, when you look at their background, their statements, their records, their lack of qualifications, are deeply concerning. And so I will, of course, listen to the administration make its case for these nominees. But if you look at somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who says that he can't think of a safe vaccine, you know, I grew up, my grandfather was a pediatrician, and he can remember practicing medicine before vaccines and after. And the number of lives that vaccines have saved are real and important to our public health and safety. Tulsi Gabbard has some really outlandish views that she has shared, conspiracy theories, and seems to repeat or regurgitate a lot of Russian talking points. That should concern all Americans because she's been nominated for the top intelligence position, and I don't want our secrets shared with our adversaries, among other things. So I will, of course, as I said, listen to the administration about its reasons for wanting these people, but several of these nominees on their very face seem highly unqualified.
Is former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi an improvement over Matt Gaetz for U.S. Attorney General?
Look, at the end of the day, what is important for any nominee, including the Attorney General and including the nominee for Secretary of Defense, who I also have serious concerns about, they have to live up to the oath that they will take to put the Constitution and the country first. And I worry about an Attorney General whose loyalties would run to the individual who is the president rather than the country. I, of course, will study Ms. Bondi's record and listen to her testimony before making my final decision.
Some of these appointees seem clearly intended not to just disrupt, but potentially even dismantle the agencies that they would be tasked with leading. To what extent do you want to protect the status quo if this is what the voters chose?
Look, this was a really, really close election. Voters spoke loudly and clearly. My own view is, among other things, going back to as early as 2008 with the economic crash, our economy has not worked for everyday Americans for a long, long time, and I think voters reached a boiling point in this last election. And so we need to continue to focus on lowering costs, protecting individual rights, including a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. But to your point, too, protecting the system in our democracy that has allowed voters to raise their voices, constituents to hold their elected officials accountable, and make sure that our government is reflecting their priorities. I will always listen to the administration, work with them when I can, as I did in the first Trump administration on items like surprise medical bills. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our democracy is intact, because that's the only way where everyday Americans can make their voices heard and we can deliver results and solutions to them that really make a difference. And so if I think that a nominee is not interested in protecting our democratic system, then I will speak up, because I believe my obligation, it's the oath I took, is to put my country and our democracy first.
Do you see yourself working with this proposed Department of Government Efficiency to be led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, or do you think there's already been some overreach with them discussing things like eliminating the Department of Education?
Well, first of all, on the Department of Education, people need to understand what the Department of Education does. Among other things, it makes sure that children with disabilities in our schools can get the services and supports that they need to live to their full potential and to contribute to our economy and our civic life. It is also, though, stepping back to your broader question, there are many ways in which the government could run more efficiently and should. That's one of the reasons I team up with Republican Rand Paul every year, because we get a list of duplication in government services, for instance, and every year or every Congress, Senator Paul and I put forward a bill that says, let's follow these recommendations. It's also why I worked on things like surprise medical billing, and why I'm working on another bill right now that would save Medicare hundreds of billions of dollars, so that we can reinvest that money and bring our deficit down. So there are things that we know we can do to lower costs and to make sure that the government is running more efficiently. The other thing I focus a lot on is eliminating legacy IT from our government agencies and really modernizing our cyber systems, our digital systems. But that, of course, takes bipartisan work. It takes consistent, thoughtful leadership, and that's what I would be looking to in the Trump administration on any of their efforts on government efficiency.
You know, when we interviewed you at the Democratic National Convention back in August, you made it very clear what you think of Trump. This is a quote. He doesn't think the law applies to him. Americans aren't ruled by kings. We're not going back to that. You know, then at your Innovate New Hampshire forum this last week, you made this very strong statement about the importance of the rule of law moving forward in America. We asked you afterward, hey, are you trying to send a message to the Trump administration? You said, oh, heavens no. So why tiptoe now around what you've already said you think Trump really is?
Look, it is very clear from the president-elect's behavior and his statements that he does not believe that the rule of law should apply to him. I will never back away from saying how important I think the rule of law is to our individual citizens in New Hampshire and around the country, but also to our economy. We can thrive at home and lead around the world because we have a rule of law. It's as important to our business community as it is to our individuals. Freedom is also the reason that we are able to innovate, take risks, fail, start up again. And again, that has been essential to the communities we build, to the freedoms we cherish, and to our economic and military leadership around the world. So I will always speak up for that. I was speaking Monday at our Innovation Forum about the importance of freedom to our innovative spirit here in New Hampshire. But obviously, I have already made clear to the Trump administration that I think some of their nominees will not put the Constitution first, which is the job of any federal nominee, any member of Congress, any president of the United States, any governor of the country.
What was the disconnect for Democrats on November 5th, particularly with the working class?
Again, our economy has not worked for everyday Americans for a long time, particularly since the crash in 2008. While we can talk about macroeconomic measures, at the end of the day, what people care about is, can they pay their rent or mortgage? Can they afford their grocery bill? Can they afford health care? Can they fill up their car and get to work without it breaking the bank? These are the things that have been really, really difficult for too many Granite Staters and too many Americans for a long, long time. And I think it really just reached a boiling point. We have done some things as Democrats, working with Republicans wherever we can, to lower costs, like capping the cost of insulin and taking measures that are already having an impact on reducing the cost of prescription drugs. There's a lot more to do. We need more housing in this country. There are bipartisan proposals in Congress, sadly, that were blocked by Republicans over the summer, but there was a bipartisan bill, for instance, that would have provided tax cuts for working families so that they can keep more of the money that they earn. The bipartisan agreement on how to provide more tax incentives to build more affordable housing in this country, and bipartisan agreement on making sure that businesses can fully deduct their research and development costs so that they can continue to innovate, create jobs, and grow the economy. Those are the types of things we need to continue to work on, but we have to really be laser focused on those everyday expenses. Childcare is another one of them that families have to pay if they're going to be able to build the kind of future for themselves and their kids that they want to do. And that's where we really need to focus. It also requires that we focus on protecting individual rights and protecting our democratic system, because we aren't going to be able to do those things if people's voices don't count.
Trump has said that mass deportations are a top priority on day one of his administration of undocumented immigrants. We've heard from a lot of Democratic leaders, governors, mayors, saying that either they won't assist in this or they will potentially resist. We'll get to the policy in a second, but is it problematic politically for Democrats if Republicans are saying we're going to enforce the law and Democrats are saying we're going to oppose you?
Look, the president of the United States has to follow the law. So does his administration. That is the hallmark of our democracy. So I will look carefully at the president's proposals, but what we should be focused on, Democrats and Republicans alike, is fixing a broken immigration system. That starts with making sure we have the right kind of border security, both at the southern border and the northern border. I was obviously very disappointed that our Republican colleagues decided, at the direction of President Trump last year, to block our bipartisan border security bill that had the support of the union that represents border agents, right? One of the most conservative law enforcement unions in the country. But they blocked that bill. Now here we are. We need to come together. We need to enhance our border security with many more personnel at the border, barriers where it makes sense, technology where it makes sense. But at the end of the day, Congress also has to fix and modernize our immigration laws so that when there are undocumented entrants into our country who don't qualify for asylum, we have a much faster asylum review system, and we can deport people who should be deported much more quickly. That is something Congress has to do. That's a constitutional obligation for us. We have reached bipartisan agreements 3 times or so in the last 10 or 11 years, and every time those bipartisan agreements have been blocked by Republicans. So we need to find a way forward. I'm hoping we can do that in this Congress.
All right, Senator Hassan, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more from the senator, including a new bill she's working on to try and stop foreign adversaries from funding actual murder and mayhem on American soil.